A routine welfare check on an elderly couple would reveal a chilling story of family, money, and murder. This is the Sherry Lee Heffernan story.
Well, with an intro like that, Amy, I mean, it's a real nail biter just to start.
Yes, I'm still on a high from seeing you and your beautiful family.
Oh my
It was
gosh.
so much fun. I had such a great time.
We really had like the best time. And
was great.
I mean, it was so nice because we did our happy hour too with our patrons.
Yes. And
Like
a few
together?
of them said, they're like, we've never seen you in the same place. It's crazy because we used to only record in the same place. In the beginning, we never recorded separate.
I ruined it by moving too far away, but I'm going to work on fixing that.
Really? I didn't know that was an option.
I think so. I think it could be an option.
I will take it. Okay, excellent. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh, actually, really quick, one more side note before we get into it.
Yeah.
This mug right here,
Yeah.
I have a story about my mug. So it's just a cute little snowman mug.
Oh, okay. I couldn't see this
So
one.
I taught my first class at John Jay. I was a PhD student. I was super young. I didn't know what I was doing. I was so nervous. And my first semester teaching, one of my students gave me this mug after the semester was over.
Oh.
And I think it's so cute, except on the inside it says, when we're together, even the coldest day feels warm. And it was a male student, so I like freaked out.
No.
Yes.
Well,
It's like one of these cute mugs where like you can only read the inside when you're like drinking it. I'm sure he meant nothing by it, but like I was like, oh my God, I
or
shouldn't
if he
teach.
did, what a compliment.
Isn't that cute? I know.
Yeah,
I
that's
was
really
like
sweet.
a baby. I was a baby. He was a baby.
It was when students still look surprised that we were the teacher because we look so young.
I know. Now they could be my children.
You know, that hasn't happened to me in a very long time. But anyway,
I
okay.
know. It's okay, though. It's okay. Either way, it's great to see you. It's great to be back. Anyway, let's get into today's case, which is another local case. Lately, I've been all about New Jersey cases. As you know, I've covered many of them.
You have.
And the one I'm writing right now is also New Jersey.
Is there a
So-
reason? Are you like seeking them
No.
out or?
I'm not at all.
Oh,
This one.
okay.
So the reason I'm covering this case, remember that producer from A&E reached out to us asking one of us to comment on a case.
Yes.
So it was this case. And the
Okay.
reason I hadn't heard about it, but it was local to me. And I was like, oh, I should know about this. So I devoured the story quickly because
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to, provide the commentary on the case.
Right.
So as I was researching the case, I was like, oh, wait a minute. This has all the elements that our listeners are drawn to. It has some emotional intensity. We got some legal controversy here and psychological complexity. So
Oh, wow.
I figured-
It's a trifecta.
I figured this was the case for me.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and dive in. Unfortunately, there is no information on Sherry's past. However, most sources agree that she was born in 1966 in Pennsylvania. But what I can tell you is that in 2021, at the time of the events we are discussing, she was residing in Landenberg, Pennsylvania, and was working as a realtor for both New Jersey and Maryland.
Where in Pennsylvania?
Landenberg?
You'd think as a Pennsylvanian now, I would know these places, but I don't. You'd also think as someone who lived and worked in Jersey for so many years, I'd know Jersey places, and I'm still like half of them are a mystery. Okay.
Well, me too. I've lived here, since I
yeah.
was 13, pretty much
Yeah.
on and off, and there's so many places I've never heard of. So
Okay.
I can tell you, though, she was 55 years old at the time of the events.
Mhm.
She had one sister. Not very clear what their relationship was like. I'm not even sure if they were in contact or not.
Mm-hmm.
Sherry's father, Jack Enders, had a longtime partner named Frenchie Patoy, and they lived on a beachfront property in the Surf City part of Long Beach Island, New Jersey. Have you been to Long Beach Island, LBI?
Yeah, but it's been real, like since I was, maybe even a kid or like, I don't know, teens, 20, like very long time.
It's a great vacation spot. And as we know, my 12-year-old daughter just spent some time there with her friend.
Yes.
She has a better life than we do.
I know that. Yeah.
So it's a really upscale, beach community, lots of people coming there in the summer, a little quieter in the off season, but a beautiful place.
Yeah.
Now, both Frenchie and Jack were pretty elderly. He was 87 and she was 75, but they lived on their own without assistance, and they were a pretty happy couple.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Frenchie was not Sherry's mother. It's not clear how long the couple had been together. Although I get the impression that they had been together a while and they were in very much a committed relationship.
Okay.
I don't know much about the couple other than that they both had other relatives, including Frenchie's daughter, Valerie Evans, and Jack's grandson, who was Sherry's sister's son. I guess we could say Sherry's nephew. Again, I don't believe they had a relationship, though.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Valerie became concerned about the couple's welfare when she tried calling Frenchie several times to thank her for a birthday card that she had recently sent her husband. But Frenchie never picked up, and she just kept trying. Things were even more concerning when Valerie called Jack's house to see where Frenchie was, and Jack's daughter Sherry answered. Now, Sherry said that Jack wasn't there, but that she would text Valerie his cell phone number. But when Valerie called the number that Sherry had given, no such phone number existed. It's kind of strange.
Okay.
So after another 24 hours of not being able to contact Jack or Frenchie, Valerie called the police and asked them to do a welfare check.
Mm-hmm.
So around 4 p.m. on October 3rd, 2021, police went to the Surf City residence just to check on the couple and make sure everything was okay. But sadly, everything was not okay, and they found a horrific scene. Jack was deceased in his recliner. He had clearly been beaten and covered in a pile of clothes. He had also been shot through the jaw and had multiple stab wounds.
Oh my gosh.
Frenchie was found curled up, face down at the bottom of the main stairwell, and she also had been shot and stabbed multiple times.
Ugh.
Their autopsy revealed a prolonged and brutal death. Jack had suffered blunt force trauma in addition to the shot through his jaw, and he had been stabbed 51 times with several wounds severing his right carotid artery. Frenchie had been shot in the face and stabbed 39 times. Most of the stabs were to her torso area. So what do you automatically think when you hear this gruesome crime scene?
A lot of anger, a lot of hate, personal.
Mhm.
That's not always the case, and I don't always go to that, but it sounds like that in this case.
Okay. Well, also, this is an older couple who kind of kept to themselves.
Well, yeah.
And might I add, there wasn't really anything missing from the scene. It didn't seem like burglary gone wrong.
Since we know the title of the story, I guess we're headed in that direction, but
Yeah.
I'm very curious to hear about this.
And it wouldn't take long for police to find their suspect. Surveillance footage captured an RV that was registered to Sherry crossing the Long Beach Island Bridge in the late night and pre-dawn hours of September 29th, 2021. Now, Long Beach Island, if you've ever been there, there's a really long bridge that takes you into the island. And
Yeah.
there's lots, you remember that? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Beautiful views. It's like the
Yes.
excitement of getting there. It's like kind
Yes.
of goes over this hill. So there were plenty of surveillance cameras. This was pretty recently, again, 2021.
Yeah.
Police pulled the license plate reader technology for the RV, and they were quickly able to track the vehicle's movements. It pinged all along the route from Sherry's home in Pennsylvania to her father's home in New Jersey. And this was also in a timeline that was consistent for the murders. Now, the same RV was seen leaving Jack and Frenchie's home, and additional footage from multiple cameras in the area showed a person wearing oversized clothing, hopping over a backyard fence, and entering and exiting the property while carrying a large orange bag.
Okay, so
Okay.
this sounds premeditated too. There's a bag in and out
Yes.
of the scene. Okay. Are you going to talk about motive here?
Oh, we'll spend a lot of time on motive.
Oh, okay, good.
Let's see what the police find inside the home. Now,
All right.
inside the home, they found some bloody footprints. Most reports say they were shoe prints, and these match Sherry's footprint pattern.
Okay.
Now, you know how I feel about this kind of science. I don't put much
Yeah.
stock in this. I don't think we even need this evidence. There's a lot of other evidence, but
Yeah.
they did find, they found these footprints that they claimed matched Sherry's. There were stained floors in the kitchen that had these footprints. And I don't know if they matched it to a pair of shoes that they took from her home or what they did. But again, not the strongest evidence.
I don't think that's good. You can't exactly match, but I do think it's helpful in identifying sometimes like a size. Like, is this a child,
Yes,
a
of course.
woman, a man,
Mhm.
and maybe sometimes with the type of shoe. So that's what I think it's helpful for.
You're absolutely correct. And maybe they were able to match it to the exact, shoe size and type
Right.
of shoe. I'm not sure. But they also found a discarded pair of rubber gloves and other signs of disturbance at the scene.
Mm.
And when they investigated Sherry's RV, they found blood on the inside.
I mean, I imagine they're also going to have plenty of DNA here.
Oh, for sure. So
Yeah.
DNA samples were taken from the house.
Yeah.
They confirmed Sherry's DNA on 3 door handles. Again, by itself, not the strongest evidence.
But is it mixed with the blood? Or
Well, I'm not quite sure, but I can tell you that Frenchie's DNA was found in a blood smear on the property's fence. And this is where the figure on the surveillance camera was shown hopping over the fence.
Right, okay.
So you do have the victim's blood clearly where the offender was. We don't know for sure that the offender was Sherry, but again, all these pieces are being put together.
Do they have Sherry's DNA on that fence?
Not that I know of, but that doesn't mean they didn't.
Okay.
So they have the DNA, they have the surveillance footage of the RV. So clearly investigators had enough for an arrest at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So only a few days after Jack and Frenchie's murder was discovered, Sherry was arrested at her home in Pennsylvania, and she was charged with 2 counts of murder, as well as unlawful possession of a firearm and possession of a firearm and a knife for an unlawful purpose.
Did Sherry live alone? Do we know?
She did, yes.
Okay.
She was extradited to New Jersey and held in Ocean County Jail.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if you know New Jersey well, but this is so close to me. And that's why some of these cases. So Ocean County Jail, I've never been there. I'm sure I know people that have. but it's very close to me. Right. It makes me think that like I should be working in a jail because I've never done. Have you worked in a jail at all? I know you've been in jails before, but.
No, I've never worked in a jail.
No, neither have I. And I think I want to.
Well, you want to work in a prison, so it would make sense that you'd also want to work in a jail.
Well, yeah, but prisons and jails are very different.
Yeah, but I can see if you want to work in some form of custody, I can understand. Yeah.
Yes, but I don't think there's a place for me in a jail. You don't often see like educational programming in jails.
But you do in juvenile. Oh, not in the jails, though. It's a detention.
Yeah.
Center. Yep. Okay. Anyway, we digress.
As we do. Sherry pled not guilty and maintained that she was being framed for the murders.
Oh, that's the defense. Okay.
More on her theory of her being framed in a bit. Okay. But let's go to what a jury would say, because her case did go to trial. Her trial began in early February of 2024, and though none of the surveillance photos specifically showed Sherry, prosecutors had a lot of evidence, as we discussed.
Amy, before you get there, I'm just going to assume that she was held without bail until her trial.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Now, the biggest piece, I think, possibly one of the biggest pieces of evidence that we haven't discussed, but you asked about, may have been motive, because Sherry had a lot of motive, and there was some clear reasons why she would maybe want to cause harm to these victims.
Oh, okay.
Not long before the murders, Sherry and her sister had been excluded from their father's will.
Ooh.
But that's not all, because Jack had also recently put his 6-bedroom waterfront home up on the market. If you recall, Sherry was a licensed real estate agent in New Jersey where the home was. However, she was not the listing agent on the property.
Okay, well, so there's some rift here for sure. Wow.
Yeah, and a little digging, it seems that Jack's grandson became the sole inheritor of all of his property and his funds. Now, is it possible that Sherry knew about this and perhaps she was angry that she was written out of the will? Possible.
Is his grandson her son or her sister's son?
Her sister's son.
Okay.
Now, prosecutors would argue that these circumstances provide both the motive and the emotional context for a crime that they described as, quote, an act of extreme depravity intended to inflict prolonged suffering.
Yeah.
So now we have the motive, we have some forensics, we have the surveillance footage. I would say the prosecution had a pretty strong case. So I'm going to turn to what the defense would have to say.
Okay.
In a case like this, there's really not, it doesn't seem like there's that much that the defense could do. So they argued that the forensic testing could not definitively confirm that the red stains in the RV were human blood. And even if they were, that they couldn't tie them to Sherry.
All right. I mean, you're limited. I saw you give me that look, but it's like you're limited by what the evidence is and, what you can do.
They also disputed the identity of the person seen in the surveillance videos. Now, defense experts testified that the person seen in the surveillance footage looked like a man and doubted that it was just Sherry in oversized clothing. This does not seem like strong evidence. I would assume on cross-examination they were able to quickly turn this around. Unfortunately, I did not get a chance to read the trial transcripts, but it sounds like an expert saying that the footage looked like a male. I don't see how. There's no scientific evidence or there's nothing empirical about that.
Doesn't sound like this is strong for either side, though. If the identity is just unknown, if you can't see the perpetrator, then I would think the surveillance of the vehicle with a license plate is a hell of a lot stronger.
I would agree. So with the surveillance, with the motive, to me, is the strongest points.
Gotcha.
The defense also emphasized that while the RV was in fact registered to Sherry, there was no direct evidence proving that she was the one behind the wheel at the time of the crimes. And I'll give them that.
Sure.
It's possible somebody took her RV to do this, but
In
again,
an effort
who?
to frame her. Okay.
And she was never saying that. That wasn't even like her main defense was that, she kept saying that she was framed. So it's not even that she was saying somebody stole her RV.
No, but she's saying someone took it in an effort to frame her.
She doesn't quite say that. But sounds
that's the
like
defense. You're
yeah,
saying.
basically the defense is they're just introducing reasonable doubt on each piece of evidence, but their narrative overall is that she was framed.
But they don't have an alternate suspect, correct?
No,
Okay.
absolutely not.
I didn't think so.
So lastly, they presented an alibi. Now, Sherry reportedly told a friend that she was photographing sunrises at the beach in the early morning hours of September 29th.
Stop it. This is not an alibi.
So they tried to use her camera's timestamps as an alibi, but prosecutors challenged the actual timing and the relevance of the evidence.
Yeah.
Because the timing of the sunrise photographs is actually on a different day.
Yeah, that's very weak.
Not very strong. You want to take a guess what the jury says?
I mean, gonna assume they found her guilty on all counts pretty quickly.
After almost 4 weeks, which is actually pretty long. It's longer than I would have thought, given, the evidence that I'm aware of in this case. But on March 1st, 2024, not surprising given the mountain of evidence, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder and weapons charges, and this was for both the handgun and for the knife involved.
Okay.
The judge sentenced Sherry to 2 consecutive mandatory life sentences to be held in New Jersey State Prison with no possibility of parole.
Why do I feel like there's going to be more to this story, Amy?
Oh, there is.
Okay.
Kind of, yes. Remember, it's very recent. So each sentence carries a minimum term of 63 years and 9 months. So essentially, we're looking at, 126 years plus the 9 months for each, so...
And she's in Edna Man right now, I assume.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay.
At the sentencing, the judge described the crime as committed with extreme depravity and showed her absolutely no mercy.
Mm-hmm.
In court, Sherry expressed sorrow, and notice I said sorrow and not remorse, because she insisted on her innocence, saying, quote, "I really wish that I was the one who was killed."
Okay.
Despite her continued claims that she was framed, Jack and Frenchie's families conveyed a sense of relief, with Frenchie's daughter stating prayers do work, and Jack's grandson saying it's pure relief and we can all move on now. So as far as I could find, Sherry has remained at Ocean County Jail and is waiting to be moved to prison, even though her sentencing happened over a year ago.
Oh,
now,
that's
this is a long time.
Yeah.
Really quick, it's probably something we've covered in the past, but I want to just quickly tell everyone the difference between a jail and prison, because it's not common knowledge. Some people use them interchangeably, but there's some very clear differences between the two.
Right.
So a jail is typically a place where people are held while they're awaiting trial, awaiting transfer, or if they're serving a sentence of less than a year, which is typically a misdemeanor. Whereas a prison is only holding people who have already been convicted and the sentence exceeds a year. Now, waiting to be transferred for over a year is a very long time. Usually prison transfers happen, or jail transfer, should I say, transfer from jail to prison, normally happens within a few weeks to a few months.
Yep.
Now, this is going to depend on if it's federal or if it's state. Some states impose statutory limitations. Like, for example, Washington has a 41-day rule. So in the state of Washington, you have to be, it's a right of the offender that they have to be transferred to a prison within 41 days.
Why 41,
like anything else? Yeah.
Why not 40?
No, I don't know why. Like anything else, there's exceptions to the rule, of course. But in New Jersey, I'm not aware of any statutory limits. Again, delays are common, and there could be a few reasons. Do you have any thoughts on why it could be taking so long?
Well, I also wonder if it has anything to do with the facility, because she's going to, in New Jersey, she would go to Edna Man, the only female facility. Edna Man is going to be shut down. And I know that for a long time that was in the news, but I have some inside sources who tell me that they are moving that plan along. So I wonder if they're space constricted, or, if there's something inside the facility that they're just saying, hold for now. I'm not sure.
Well, I'm going to tell you.
Oh, oh, damn. And I was wrong.
I just knew that you probably had an idea because we've talked about this particular facility a lot. So I knew you would have an opinion. I don't know if you caught it, but earlier on, I said that she was going to New Jersey State Prison. Now, New Jersey State Prison is Trenton. Is it not?
Oh.
So I don't know if that was an error in some of the sources, or if maybe they're going to be making a woman's facility on that campus. I don't know.
That might be to stop placing people in Edna Man or to disperse some of the...
So I'm not sure. Again, I don't know if that was an issue with my sources or if somebody leaked information, but I thought that was interesting. I mean, usually it's going to be an issue with intake or classification or bed availability.
Yeah.
Even transportation logistics are sometimes a cause for a holdup. But as you alluded to, I think in Sherry's case, it's probably due to the impending shutdown of the only women's prison, Edna Man.
Yeah. And where do we put these people? On a side note here, I do know when you talked about transfer logistics, it's so interesting to me because I know someone who is serving time upstate New York and had to come down to the city to face charges. And he then had to wait in the city for a ride back for 3 weeks.
Oh, did they put him up in the Ritz?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's like a break from prison. But it was like 3 weeks just for a bus ride.
That's a lot.
So I've never really I'm glad you brought that up because without knowing his story, I didn't really know that was such an issue.
That's actually interesting. I never would have thought it would be that long.
No.
And we're going to be talking more about Edna Man in a future episode that we're working on or a future event we're working on.
Correct.
We both know this facility very well. I used to teach there, and you spent many, many hours there interviewing Melanie McGuire, who was the subject of our podcast, Direct Appeal.
Yes, I spent a lot of time in Edna Man.
So just to give you a little bit of information on what I could find about Edna Man.
Yeah.
Now, back in June 2021, Governor Phil Murphy declared his intention to shut down the facility. Now, this was due to longstanding safety, staffing, and infrastructure issues. We also know there's a lot of rape allegations, that's probably a huge driver as well. As of November 1st, 2023, the first phase was completed. And that was all full-time minimum security inmates were moved to the new satellite unit in Clinton Township. That facility houses those low security inmates, while medium and max security populations remain at the main campus of Edna Man. Now, the last progress update by the governor was in mid-2024, and that's when he reaffirmed his commitment to closing the main facility, but also emphasized that the state was still working with experts and the Department of Corrections to define the best plan, and no final date has been announced. State officials have indicated that they're still working on the plan on how they're going to transfer the remaining inmates, what facilities they're going to transfer inmates to, will there be new construction, and how to really manage the assets and staffing transitions.
Do you know how many how many women are at Edna Man?
Yeah, so I checked the numbers. It's about 400. So that's a lot of people to find place for.
Yeah, and the issue is you can't just build another institution and move all of them if you're worried about institutional issues, right? So I assume they're looking for ways to disperse them as opposed to taking them all and putting them back together in another facility, I think.
That's correct. So it's not the facility that's causing the issues.
Right.
It's the people inside.
Right.
As of when I researched this episode, which was late July of 2025, there's been no finalized timeline for when the units will be vacated or when the property is going to be fully shut down.
Okay.
I mean, maybe they change their mind, but I doubt it.
No,
I think it's
no.
Yeah. But either way, back to Sherry, her time in county jail will count towards her sentence. I don't know that it matters because she's essentially serving, a life sentence. I don't think she'll never see the light of day unless there's some issue on appeals. So I do think she will be moved to a state facility at some point.
Has she given any interviews, done anything, or she just remained silent?
Not as of yet, but again, this is a pretty recent case.
Yeah, I know. You were asked also by A&E
yes,
to make a statement, so I didn't know if they had something or they're just covering it. I don't know.
So A&E was covering it just because it was one of these cases that was so brutal, and it seemed to be a lot of attention in this small area, but it never really reached national news. So, there was a lot of discussion as to what was it about this case that caused such a local phenomenon, but never made it to national media. We'll talk about maybe some reasons. But this does seem like a case that maybe would have reached the national level. But to be honest, I think it just has to do with what else is in the news cycle at the time. And there was probably bigger stories.
There's been a lot of big national stories.
Yes.
Like we talked about, like true crime, the moment of the last year and the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I'm sure her case was probably eclipsed by headlines like Koberger and Lori
I would
Vallow,
agree.
Karen Reed. I mean,
I
I
would
don't
agree.
know. Because it does seem like, Amy, I'm surprised. It does seem like it would have, like, at least I would know the name or, I
Well,
don't
even
know.
me, I live about an hour away.
Yeah.
So for
Yeah.
you, maybe it wouldn't reach you, but how could it not have reached me? Not only do I live so close, I consider myself someone who's informed in this area. And I
don't
actually
know.
have a friend who lives right outside of LBI, and they also never heard of this case, which I thought
That's
was
very interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so now, does she deserve to be incarcerated? Did the system get it right? I mean, I think the motive is pretty clear here. More importantly, I think the evidence is pretty strong, right? Sherry was a realtor. She had been cut out of her father's will, and she was enraged after he refused to let her sell his estimated $2 million waterfront property.
Oh.
The crime was especially brutal, involving excessive force in the multiple stabbings, along with shooting both victims in the face and blunt force trauma to Sherry's father. I would refer to this as overkill, which essentially just means that there's more violence than needed to cause one's death. And this is a term that often reveals important psychological and relational dynamics between offender and victim.
Sure does. Oh, my goodness.
As you said, we can't always rely on that.
No, we can't. We
But,
can't
yeah.
always. Because I've heard cases where also, especially law enforcement goes, oh, yeah, it was personal.
Yeah.
And then you find out it really was not. And
And that's tunnel vision.
Yes. It doesn't mean there's not rage involved, but it doesn't have to be personal for it to be rage-filled. In this case, it definitely, strikes me as...
Yeah,
as that.
it usually, not always again, it usually shows a personal connection to the victim. And overkill is often seen in crimes involving someone close to the victim, such as a family member, an intimate partner, or a close friend, because usually the excessive violence reflects deep emotional investment, whether that be anger, betrayal, resentment, or just some sort of longstanding tension. And this is something I teach called expressive violence. Do you teach expressive and instrumental violence?
Yeah.
Yeah. So expressive violence is violence that's intended not just to kill, but to really vent or communicate rage or emotional pain. Whereas instrumental is more like a means to an end. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. Instrumental is utilitarian crime. So I teach it in terms of deterrence because instrumental crimes are more deterrable than expressive crimes.
Yes. So an example of an instrumental crime might be if I punch you in the face as a way to incapacitate you so I can take your phone. If I punch you in the face because I'm pissed off at you, that would be expressive, whereas the first example would be instrumental. And I'm sorry to do that example. I would never punch you in the face.
I was just looking, going, she's thinking about punching me in the face. It's okay. I understand.
And going back to, again, we don't know much about Sherry's childhood or the family dynamics, but we do know she was written out of the will and that her father didn't want her involved in the sale of his home. So that at least tells us that there was some maybe longstanding tension or resentment on Sherry's part. And there was probably some anger and betrayal going on as well.
I wonder if anyone from the family will speak out at some point about this, anyone, because this is one of those cases where it really is unfortunate to not know what was going on. Or, I'm thinking even more, it's obvious there was a family rift, right? What caused it? I don't know, but
we do know what caused it. It seems, you're saying like why he even took her out of the will.
Yeah,
to
like
begin with.
we don't know what caused that, but I'm the biggest question I have here is, does she have a history of violence or any severe mental health diagnoses? Like those are the questions that you said you couldn't answer, and those are the two biggest questions that I have at the end. But
yeah, no, those are the questions that are left unanswered at this time.
Right.
But in this type of crime, there's also an indication of strong emotional motivation, as brutality may reflect. So we see possible uncontrolled rage, feelings of humiliation or rejection, revenge or punishment. And again, these emotions are more typical in personal relationships because these psychological wounds run pretty deep when you're dealing with family.
But also like prolonged torture, they said. So
yeah, well, that's why, brutality, this is brutal, right? So brutality can signal that an offender is trying to exert power or dominance or ownership. especially if the victim was perceived as defying or abandoning or perhaps cutting off the offender.
Right.
Which in this case, the offender was cut off financially and probably emotionally as well.
Yeah, this is a horrific crime.
And then there's something else that extreme violent crimes can point us to: narcissistic injury.
Oh.
So when someone has a narcissistic personality disorder, something like being cut out of a will can be very triggering. And while we don't know if Sherry was ever diagnosed as narcissistic, I think that this level of violence toward her father and her father's partner kind of indicates that there was this anger. Possibly she had a complete loss of empathy, even towards her family. Somebody who has a narcissistic personality disorder is going to take that even harder. For example, if you or I were to be cut out of someone's will in our family, maybe we would feel let down or betrayed, but it wouldn't get to this level of anger that would lead us to commit a violent crime. But someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder, that's going to hit much harder.
So that's like strain theory right there too, because if they have a narcissistic personality disorder, it sounds like they just can't cope as well. So.
Exactly. They're lacking the proper coping mechanisms to deal with something like this.
Right. That's interesting. I've never heard of narcissistic injury before, Amy. Thank you for teaching me something.
Wow. Well, I only learned about it when I was researching, because I teach about narcissistic personality disorder. Yeah. But yes, narcissistic injury is a terminology I came across when I was researching this episode.
Right.
Which is why we love doing what we do, because we're still learning all the time.
Every episode.
Every episode, yes. So you kind of made a nice segue into theory. That's where I wanted to go next.
Oh, okay.
It's a little difficult, again, not knowing much about her background, but I think strain theory is very clear here.
Yeah.
I think possibly some trait theories looking at a potential personality disorder, but again, we can't know.
Yeah.
For me, this is textbook control balance theory.
Yes, I do see control balance. Yeah, we've covered this before, but just briefly, people who are subjected to who feel overly controlled will commit crimes to basically lash out against that. Whereas people who have no control and no oversight, they commit like crimes of greed. It sounds to me actually like she was out of control. So
yeah, that's true.
She had lost control in a different way in this theory, but it's an attempt, as you said, the crime, of course, to exert power, control, dominance. So she is trying to regain that. And I mean, this is a premeditated crime.
Yeah.
So yes, I think she was trying to show like, I'm in control now. Look how long I'm going to subject you to this pain.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
From what I understand, she was well aware of the fact that, her nephew was going to get everything if, her father passed. So it's not even like this was motivated by greed, because it's not like she did this thinking she was then going to inherit the money. She knew none of this was going to be hers.
Anger.
Yes,
this is
pure anger.
No
financial motive. I don't think, unless she believed somehow she was going to benefit financially from this. I don't see how that's possible. But
I mean, I think your explanation of expressive crimes, this is the ultimate expressive crime. Oh my goodness. Such a terrible one.
Something else I want to point out, not really a theory, but remember the defense claims that Sherry was framed. Let's talk about framing for a minute, because this is highly unlikely. Now, it does occur, but it is so rare.
Yeah.
Now, framed implies that someone deliberately set up the defendant to take the fall.
Right.
Now, this is kind of hard to measure, but it includes planting physical evidence, coercing witness or fabricating testimony, manipulating forensic results, and I just don't see how that is even remotely possible in this case. Now, framing does happen. Like, framing may account for a minority of wrongful convictions.
Yes.
But when it does occur, usually there's a motive to protect the real killer.
Right.
Or some sort of corruption in law enforcement or prosecution.
Right.
Maybe someone's a convenient scapegoat in a high pressure or a high profile case.
Yeah.
I don't see her falling into any of these buckets. Do you?
No, that's why I said, to what end would someone frame her? I don't think so.
I don't think so at all. Well, legally, based on the current information, her conviction sounds pretty legit to me.
Yeah.
It's supported by significant forensic, digital, and testimonial evidence. But as we know, the legal system does allow for correction if there's any new or credible evidence that arises. So, if Sherry is indeed innocent, that evidence just hasn't come to light yet in a way that would compel review or reversal, but that's certainly possible in the future.
I mean, I don't think it sounds likely, but I understand. I would say the only real possibility on appeal would be if there was like a judicial error, ineffective counsel, or something like that. I don't think it's going to be evidence that's going to help her, but we'll see.
I don't either, but she seems to be doubling down and
I mean, okay.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on it. I'm actually curious. I don't think that she'll win on appeal. I'm curious to see what the issues that they're going to try to raise on appeal.
Yeah.
I'm also curious to see where she ends up, but that kind of brings us to the greater female incarceration or the female offender population in New Jersey.
Right.
So we'll definitely keep an eye on that. Any other theories on her before we get to our question?
I think we got it. I mean, I don't know if we got it. You can't ever really. We did the best we could without all the knowledge.
Yes.
Having all the background.
Okay. So before we go, we have a question from a supporter.
You're smiling so big.
What'd you say?
Is it like a fun question because you're smiling?
Well, it's not that it's a fun question, but she has the coolest name of any patron we've ever had. She knows who she is, and so do you. I'm not going to say her name because we don't usually say full names, but you know her name. Let's just say we have a patron that shares one of our names pretty closely. Okay. Anyway, this question is, I was hoping to get your insights on gender-informed approaches in the criminal legal system. In an ideal system, how would you approach treating female offenders of crime differently than we do now? And what resources would you like to see for reentry that maybe don't exist or aren't widely available in our system at the current time? Since you teach women in crime, I'm going to let you take this and then I'll add anything that I think needs.
Okay, great question. So the needs of women and men are different. And so for a long time, different case law basically dictated that women would have the same rights as men, which was signaled that they did not have services or access to certain things they needed. However, what we know now is that they shouldn't have the same exact services because the needs of women are different. So yes, we need gender-informed. Women typically do tend to need more access to mental health care. I think one of the most significant things we can do to help women, many of whom incarcerated have children, is to keep them bonded to their families. So we should facilitate visitation. I won't totally get into the whole issue of nurseries in prisons, although there are benefits, but I'm not going to get totally into that. What I will say is that the important issues here, I think, are to keep women bonded with their families, provide proper mental health treatment, and I mean really proper, and that should be extended afterwards because these women have a history of abuse, addiction, and other issues that really set them up for failure unless we intervene and do something more meaningful. So I don't think that we overall fail in that regard, but I don't think we overall do a great job either. And also, as an issue that we talked about today, the number one thing we can do for women incarcerated is to keep them safe from further abuse. That should not be a fear, their actual safety in prison.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I don't really have anything to add. I just want to underscore the point. We need trauma-informed care in prisons with women. Meghan, I don't know what the numbers are, but is it incorrect to say the majority of women inmates are victims of abuse?
Yes, it's somewhere upward of about 70-75%.
Okay, I knew it was majority. I didn't realize it was overwhelming majority.
It is.
So so that tells us something about, again, trauma-informed practices in women's prisons. All right, thank you so much for that question, Meghan. Thank you for answering it so perfectly. If you have a question for us, feel free to message us at womeninCrimePodcast.com/contact. And as a reminder, if you are a patron at the Lifer tier, your question is guaranteed to be read on air. All right, well, thank you all so much for joining us today, and we will catch you next time on Women in Crime.
Women in Crime is written and hosted by Meghan Sachs and Amy Shlosberg. Our producer is James Varga. Script editing is by Abagail Belcastro. Audio editing is by Siler Burr and Jose Alfonzo. And music is by Desert Media. If you enjoy the show, please remember to follow and leave a review. You can also support the show through Patreon, where you can get access to additional ad-free content such as exclusive full-length episodes, lectures, a book club, and virtual happy hours with Meghan and Amy. For more information, visit patreon.com/womenandcrime.
Sources for today's episode include the Associated Press, People.com, RLS Media, Law and Crime, NJ.gov, and the New Jersey Globe.